Good evening and a warm welcome to all. At the outset, I'd like to thank AIOS for this wonderful and amazing conference. So our IC is titled as Troubleshooting and Sterilization. We would all know that a successful surgery would all go a waste if your sterilization process is not good. So it is very important for every management to look into the process of sterilization and also have a complete knowledge of how to troubleshoot the failure so that you can educate your paramedical staff to find out the simple faults which could happen. As you would know, though a lot of advancement has been happening in the sterilization process, the steam sterilization still remains the most commonly used because it is very easy and it is very cost effective. As you know, 310 million surgeries are performed worldwide, and a majority of them is in our field, that is a lens-based procedure. And still, both in developed and developing nations, the autoclave sterilization failure is as low as 0.2 and as high as 43% in various studies. So what are the reasons for this? There could be the various type of autoclave, the wrong cycle being used, monitoring methods not being done, user errors because our paramedical staff have not been taught to handle them. Equipment issues is common with any machines, and not matching the right autoclave to the instrument load and the cycle. So today here we have a wide range of speakers. Dr. T. Nirmal Frederick, who's been a pioneer and synonymous with the word quality all over India. He is the Managing Director of Dr. Nirmal Eye Care Hospital, Chairman Insurance Committee, past President of TNOA, and a Principal Accessor in NABH, and has been instrumental in bringing out the eye care quality standards in for NABH. Myself, Dr. Kumaran, and Dr. Niranjan Karthik, who's been an academic person all throughout his career and works as a consultant in Dr. Nirmal Eye Hospital. So to deliver the first talk, I call upon Dr. Nirmal Frederick, who will be talking to us about the different pros and cons of the autoclave and how to audit them in your operation theatre. So please come over.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Kumaran, for the invite and the kind words. It's indeed a pleasure and privilege to be part of this your instruction course. I'm sure this is a important aspect of practice and stumbling blocks. So I'll try to remove the blocks for you. And this is one instrument it's very important for our safe practice, and I have no financial interest. Some of the names utilized may come because of the familiarity. Right, so this is overview of sterilization process that's happening in our institutions. Right, sterilization may be done behind the scenes, but their impact on patient safety is significant, and for that we need to understand some of the basics involved. And autoclave is not just a machine, it is a promise of safety to our patients. So how do we go about? There are various, I'll just briefly touch upon a few basic points for you to understand why this machine is important and why do we need to know the facts before buying or utilizing the entire specification of this machine. So this is an overview of methods available for sterilization, and so this filtration, irradiation, sunlight, all these are very difficult to validate and calibrate. So in quality field we need something that we can validate and also calibrate. So this is where heat sterilization scores over other methods of sterilization, and we use moist heat for sterilization. So previously, those of you as old as me, we know that we have been using dry heat sterilization, a hot plate in our camp settings. Right now the preferred method is moist heat sterilization at temperatures below 100, at a temperature of 100 or above 100. So these are the three variations that is available in most of our machines. Right. So this one equipment The principle has not changed over centuries, right? So now you know why it is a time-tested device. So Greek auto means self, and clave is meaning K, that means a self-locking device. Since the heat generator was very high, so there has to be a self-locking mechanism for safety. This is how pressure cooker was found, and this is an extension of pressure cooker principle, and this principle has not changed over the past 150 years. Right. So how do we select? So most of the our friends who call me ask for which type of autoclave to buy and what are the because generally the manufacturer or the vendors, they tend to confuse with certain terminologies and specification which we often don't understand. Right. So I've already told you the principle of autoclave, where there is moist heat. Right. So boiling point of water is directly proportional to the pressure when volume is constant, and when pressure increases, temperature increases. So this is how temperature is reached. So you have a chamber, you have a surrounding jacket filled with water, and then we have a treated water supply. Please ensure you have treated water supply for your autoclave. Most of the problem mechanically as well as infection control wise happens because we use poor quality water. So if you control this quality parameter, you can get good quality sterilization. And this has to be in a closed chamber, depending on the type of chamber we use, to 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or even sometimes it can go up to 1 hour. So ideally, all vegetative forms and spores have to be killed to attain sterilization. So this is the principle. This for those of you who really need this principle, it's important that mechanism of sterilization is denaturation of critical protein in the bacteria, amoeba, protozoa, or whatever organism we want to kill. So there are 3 phases of sterilization. So I already told you that there is a closed chamber, and in this chamber there are 3 phases that happen seamlessly. So fluid, temperature, and the pressure variation. So this undergoes from when you start the machine, first phase. So both pressure and fluid temperature increases. In the second phase, it scales up to a very high level, and this is where moist heat is generated. And in the third phase, so depending on the type of machine you use, the ambient pressure and temperature will come down, so that when you take the consumables out of the machine, you would be able to handle. Right. So this is the vacuum pressure temperature principle, 1, 2, 3 stage. So why steam? There are so many new machines coming up. If you go to the trade hall, there will be a lot of vendors who are selling sterilizers and autoclaves. So steam is efficient heat transference. So it transfers to the items we want to sterilize, and steam at 100 degrees centigrade contains 7 times as much energy as water at 100 degrees. So steam is very efficient as well as cost effective, and heats up the cells efficiently than air at similar temperature. So if somebody is using a mixture of air and water, you always prefer a moist heat autoclave than some machine that use air. So these are the important parameters of an autoclave. You need to ask for this parameters when you see a autoclave. It will be in the small word in the brochure. So steam, temperature, pressure, time. So this is the 4 parameters that is used in the indicators also. So 3 major factors for effective autoclave is pressure has to be above 15 psi. Temperature, I think we all know this, 121 degrees centigrade is the timeline or the milestone, and time for 30 minutes. Now there are many autoclaves which does it at a much lesser time, say 20 minutes, 15 minutes, like that. So you need to know the parts. I've already told you about the chamber. Then this chamber has to be protected to safeguard the people around. So you need to have a good quality door with a lock. And heating element is important. Is like any other heating element we use for boiling the water, but in autoclave it has to withstand the pressure as well as the repeated variations in the water quality and quantity. Then you need to have a water reservoir, and we need to have a good drainage system. Most of the problem happens in these three areas: heating elements, drainage system, and the vacuum system. So we need certain things to control these three elements, and then you have a control panel which tells all this metrics in a either we can printed form or in a display form. Then we need to have a safety feature for our staff. Right, these are the overview of types of autoclave. First to come was the pressure cooker type, and then came the vertical autoclave, and then because of the large size requirement and certain safety requirement, horizontal autoclave came into the picture. And in this laboratory autoclave, there are various types. You can see the size and shape varies between organizations. So in the hospital setting, we use only these models. So one is the gravity method. Gravity method is nothing but the vertical one. So this is generally used to sterilize biohazardous weights, glassware, or unwrapped goods. This unwrapped is very, very important in our day-to-day usage. If you are using something directly exposed to moist heat, you can use this. And then we have the vacuum method, where the air inside the chamber is pumped out by various techniques, and here we need to use the wrapped loads. So most of our, either you wrap in a linen cloth or you wrap in a sheet of paper. There are various types of paper and readily available package materials. So pre-packaged goods are available. Then how to sterilize the liquid? You can use water, saline, or agar also can be used. So for that you need a good lab quality autoclave if you want to sterilize the liquid. Right, so this is the commonest autoclave used. So most of us were using this before, and so here the steam comes into direct contact with the surface, and prolonged penetration time is essential for sterilization. And here one problem is incomplete air elimination, because the vacuums are not calibrated properly. And important thing is this steam cannot reach into the hollow cannula tubings, particularly the phaco tubings, vitrectomy tubings. It's very difficult to use. That is the reason, to avoid TAS, it's always better to use autoclave where the steam can reach to the hollow cannulas. And so very difficult to calibrate and validate this autoclave, and there is always residual air behind, so which can compromise the sterilization. And this is the reason NABH as well as other standard organization has proposed horizontal autoclave where vacuum, the gravity displacement part is not there. So there are certain pros and cons. These are relatively low cost, easy to use, and ideal for sterilizing solid instrument, and suitable for small to medium size load, but it takes longer cycle time, can cause damage to the delicate material, particularly directly kept materials, and steam distribution is uneven. That's the reason very difficult to validate or calibrate. Right, the second commonest equipment or different type of autoclave is the vacuum assisted autoclaves. So what happens here is, a vacuum assisted autoclave pulls pressure from the chamber. So before the sterilization happens, the air inside the chamber is removed by certain methodology. So we have two types, B type and N type autoclave. So B type is a positive pressure displacement autoclave. So there is a separate steam generated which feeds the main body of the autoclave in this system. So you can, if you go back to your theater, if it's a horizontal autoclave, you can see a separate steam generated which feeds the autoclave with the steam. So this is faster because there is ready-made steam available in the additional chamber. The second type is N-type autoclave or negative pressure displacement. This is nothing but steam generated and vacuum generated separately. Most of this type of N-type autoclave is used in the dentist clinic. So one important factor here is here again the calibration and validation is difficult in N-type autoclave, and it will not reach the hollow chambers or the hollow tubings. So for ophthalmology, if you are going to sterilize phaco tubings, re-sterilize phaco tubings or vitrectomy or your cannulas, it's always better to go for B-type autoclave. So I already told you class N and class B. Class B is useful for wrapped and hollow instrument. And then there are various types available, variations, benchtop autoclaves and vertical autoclaves in all sizes depending on the size and scope of your autoclaves. So I already told you about the important differences. Class B is the gold standard now. It's a bit expensive and require regular maintenance, and there are various sizes available depending on the type of instrument, type of cannulas you want to use. You can select your class B autoclave. Right, the third sterilizer is the ethylene oxide sterilizer or ETO. So we all know the pros and cons. This is useful for materials that cannot be sterilized with heat. Right, heat resistant material can be sterilized with your regular autoclave, but non-heat resistant materials, the silicone tubings or those things, we need ethylene oxide sterilizer. It takes a long cycle time. That's why most of our staff would be held up with ETO sterilization for long hours inside the theater, and it may not be suitable for certain materials or loads, but it's relatively low cost. So the machines available now are in very good and cheaper. The fourth, the new machine is the plasma sterilizer. So one important thing is this uses low temperature plasma to kill microorganisms. So even non-heat resistant materials, we can use plasma sterilizers. So the pros is heat sensitive medical equipment can be sterilized and very short cycle time. So hospitals who need very short sterilization time can go for this, and sterilization is very effective, kills all bacteria, viruses, fungi and spores, and it's environmentally friendly, unlike ETO which is carcinogenic and generates toxic chemical. Plasma is not very toxic. Right, so the cons, more expensive, there is a limited load capacity, and we also need to process and prepare the instrument in a different way. You need a separate special packing for plasma sterilizer, and maintenance at present, since the technology is new, it's costly, and the regular replacement of components also quite costly because the filters have to be changed at the defined intervals. So some companies say every 6 months we need to change the filters and the tubings. Right. So what type of autoclave do you need? This is very, very important. You need to write down the size of your operation, type of your surgeries, type of instrument. I'll just take 2 minutes more. And so basic cycles in autoclave, you need to know the gravity, pre-vacuum and liquid I've already covered. So questions to ask before buying your next autoclave. So many of my junior colleagues ask me which autoclave to buy. So I ask them to write answers for these questions and decide themselves about which autoclave suits them. So decision making for purchase: what size autoclave do I need? What type of loads will I be running in my autoclave? What type of loads? What is the steam source? So whether I need a moist heat or dry heat, or if I have the money and inclination, go for plasma. So do I have the right type of water? So this is the foremost thing I advise all my colleagues, that go for the right type of water. And how much floor space will my unit take up? In a small CSST area or small adjacent sterilization room, you need to select your equipment first before deciding the size of the operation theatre as well as the adjacent sterilization room, and what utilities and support are required. For example, if you want to buy a ETO machine and install, the vendor will ask you at least 3 feet clear area surrounding the ETO machine. This is a statutory requirement because the maintenance person has to go around the machine to change the filters and check for toxic leakage, and also calibrate the machine frequently. So it is a requirement that whenever you install a ETO machine, there has to be a clear 3 feet surrounding the machine. And also the ETO effluent has to go above your building, at least 8 feet above your building, only you can let out. These are certain specifications. So should I invest in water and energy saving technology? Yes, the autoclaves are water guzzling machines. So if you are installing a distilled water plant, so ensure you have the right quantity, but ideal is to go for a distilled water based autoclave. And how will I get the autoclave installed? So front loading or back loading. There are two ways of loading: front loading and getting the sterilized product from the front itself, or front loading and getting the sterilized product behind. And is tech support available? Particularly plasma sterilizer need lot of tech support. And what is the warranty? Go for warranty at least for 3 years or 5 years. And the replacement parts is necessary, so ensure you have local support. Most of the important equipment, the replacements are difficult to get, particularly the German ones are difficult to get within 2 or 3 months. So CMC, AMC, preventive maintenance, all those things you need to bargain with the vendor. And also go take a demo, and staff training should be available. Whereas the sterilizer manufacturer in-house is always, so within the country is always better. How many years has the manufacturer been in business is also important. And manufacturer having expertise with a range of product rather than one single product. And new or refurbished autoclaves, a lot of refurbished autoclave also coming. It might be cheaper in the earlier part, but it's very difficult over a period of time to get the parts, because most of the MNC machines beyond the 7 years, they don't support with the spare parts. So how to decide on the size, type and brand, chamber size? And you need to have validation reports. Get at least 2 or 3 validation reports from the vendor. And also ask for energy efficiency and cycles for wrapped and unwrapped instrument, warranty, maintenance and servicing, and regulatory compliance. In some countries, autoclaves have to go through a regulatory compliance, either CE certification or ISO certification, or in India, BIS certification is necessary. So price, maintenance and service costs, all these factors have to be factored in before deciding to go for the autoclave. So I think I have already emphasized about the type of water. Better always, this water is the lifeblood of any autoclave. Purified water is the best source. 3 methods to remove impurities. You can go for softening. You can use reverse RO water. You can also go for deionization, so which removes most of the solid contaminants, minerals and ions. You also need to know something about the engineering controls and the administrative control for operating the machine. So you need to go through the standard operating procedures. So a lot of new machines are coming up. These are the recent advances. Automation, full automated machines. There are computerized controls to control the data, record keeping and remote monitoring. You can take printout or have a log of this autoclaves things. Then there are new autoclaves to have different programs and cycles. And now there are green autoclaves coming up that reduce or recycle the water consumed, particularly in water sensitive places. And we can also control the energy requirement from 80 kilowatts horsepower per day to 20 kilowatts. So there are certain power control systems. So choosing autoclave for ophthalmic purpose, ideal is B class or plasma sterilizer. Capacity match the scope of services, number of surgeries and the size of instruments. So invest in yourself. It's the best investment you will ever make. The next best investment is autoclave for your surgical practice. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take. Thank you. Yes, Kumran. Since I need to go for another meeting, I'll finish my next talk also. It's a very short talk. Yeah. Unfortunately, no, sir. So there are new, the olden flash autoclaves are not suitable because one, it's difficult to validate. Second, it's difficult to calibrate. Third, it can be used for emergency purposes for non-hollowed consumables. But for hollowed, suppose a phaco probe or phaco tubings or vitrectomy tubings, always to better go the full cycle B-class autoclave sterilization. Yeah. Ladies first. Depends on your cassette. So, basically all this equipment you need to first undergo the manufacturer recommendations. If your manufacturer doesn't recommend ETO, then it's not a good idea. But another fact is when you are using ETO for hollowed instrument like phaco probe, always leave a time period for the gas to go out. So at least 12 to 24 hours is recommended for this purpose. So don't immediately use, at least 2 or 3 days is essential. No, cassette that's what I said. Cassette depends on the manufacturer recommendations. Some software will not accept ETO'd cassettes.
So the water supplied by the municipal corporation in our part is soft and it's a drinkable water. Can we use the same, or we still need to soften it?
No, you can do a water testing, get the report, see whether it is the dissolved substances, DSS they will give. If it is within that limitation, you can use.
So what is the limit?
No, that depends on your area. So I can tell for Chennai area, it has to be less than 10 DSS, right? So you have to take your area limitations.
Air conditioned water which is
So use the mic, sir.
So, yeah. Sorry, air condition?
ACs are working these days. The water which comes out of it is a wonderful thing.
Okay, thank you for the energy saving thing. But it bits unsafe, sir, because many of the filters, if you take scrape, you have grown a lot of molds and fungi from that air fins, right? Yeah, I understand that. Yes, you are right in a way, but don't directly use the water. You have to treat the water and then use. So there is a lot of things for contamination here, right? It doesn't come foolproof. So if you see the air, it all depends on how frequently you clean the filters, whether it's split AC or window AC. So there is it's a recirculating unit. So most of the recirculating units, there are air pockets where you cannot reach and clean. So using water from that outlet, there is a risk of contamination. Yeah. You mean dechlorinated? Yeah. I don't think we need to use chlorinated water. So it all depends on the supply, right? So if you are using a RO plant, water from the RO plant, you can directly use. If you are using a distilled water, you can still use. Only thing, the distilled water should not be stored over 2 days. That depends on the water you use. So that's why water testing is essential. So to know the what is the mainline water you use, so we need to do a water testing, get a report. Or if you are going to use some alternative supply like RO or well water or corporation water, you have to understand the basic characteristic of the water you are getting. Accordingly, you have to select a method to treat that and use it. Right, whether you use it for cleaning the instrument or clean our surfaces or the theater, it's always better to know the water first and then deciding about the usage. Sorry. No, can we? Brands, sorry, I will not recommend this. No, so there are good import materials available. Melag is one, Hikanshu is one, that's a Japanese unit. So the main problem is the availability of spares from these vendors. I have all the equipments in my theater, right? I've also gone through all these pros and cons practically. Melag autoclave, I'm difficult to get a sensor from Germany for the last 4 months. So when they sent a wrong one, which is so it's very difficult to get the spares. On the other hand, the Indian manufacturer, the cost is less, spares are easily available, and they are more amenable to us for small hospitals.
So we don't have a clear-cut answer for your question, but the most important thing is understand what you have to look for when you select the machine and then evaluate it yourself, rather than going for what I say or sir says, because it might suit my practice but might not suit your practice. So basic thing is understand the process, the facts and the protocols, and then evaluate the autoclave by yourself. So that is what I would suggest.
Yeah. We'll take it private discussion. You can, yeah.
How frequently we should change the water of autoclave? For every cycle or
Yes.
every day? Okay.
Preferably every cycle.
Every cycle.
Okay, it has at least 2 to 4 liters of water depending on the size. A 50 to 60 liter autoclave would have 4 liters. So preferable to change every cycle rather. If you have 2 cycles per day, better to change it.
Okay, I'll just move to this my topic on how to audit and how to check the various registers. This is very important from the legal point of view, and so we all know that sterilization is critical and proper auditing is essential, and so we have standards which provide framework for quality assurance. Right, so fundamentally we all know that complete elimination is the goal of all sterilization, and I think I've already told you about the physical methods, steam, and chemical methods like ethylene oxide, hydrogen peroxide and glutaraldehyde. But here the critical factor is time, temperature, concentration of the chemical and the contact time, right? So whatever documentation method you are using, you need to capture these critical factors and see whether these critical factors have been properly validated and used in your facility. So validation of each sterilization method is mandatory, whether it is ETO or steam sterilization or plasma sterilization. So first and foremost, you need to have standard operating procedures. So what is the autoclave type? So the SOP has to be defined and displayed. What autoclave you are using, what consumables you are going to sterilize, and what is the indicator to use, whether it is biological or whether it is type. There are various types. So I think Dr. Kumaran will tell about the various types, when to use which indicator and how to use. And responsibility is defined for biological indicators, water culture and horticulture, etc. So the frequency your hospital policy has to decide. And how to audit, generally if you have a system in place, you have a HIC committee or infection control committee, and OT in charge is responsible for the validation and maintaining the SOP. And in case there is an external assessment like NABH assessment, so they will go through the audit. Right. So the key standard here is hospital infection control focuses on sterilization practices, and also the facility has to have equipment for proper sterilization, and there has to be a documented process, training and compliance monitoring. So these three are important part. So you need to have a standard operating procedure, you need to train your manpower, and you have to ensure that the manpower complies to all this training method. And standards mandate regular auditing and quality improvement, and you also need to have traceability and validation of sterilization process. This is where all the some of the equipment fail, because it's very difficult to validate their principle and the type of sterilization. So these are the essential documentation you need to follow. Instrument tracking from point of use through reprocessing. So reprocessing is nothing but so the cassettes you get or the processed end units, right? When you want to reuse them, it's called as reprocessing. Okay, I think somebody asked about reprocessing of these cassette. Most of the manufacturers do not advise reprocessing, because most of the cassettes are sensor based, and the machine is planned in such a way that it will block from reusing. Okay, so there is a catch with all these vendors. So you need to have batch control numbers and sterilization cycle parameters. So all your batch loads have to have batch control numbers, and you need operator identification, nothing but your staff identification, and also whether the process has been verified. You need to maintain logs and calibration record, calibration of the machine, calibration of the process, and also log of this through a register. And if there are non-conformance with this, you need to report them and also do corrective action. Right. So these are the different types of indicators. Class 1 is process indicator. So this will say that a particular temperature is reached and there is color change when exposed. The class 2 indicators are generally test indicator. Just to know, Bowie-Diggs test for steam penetration. I'm sure Kumaran will have wonderful videos for this. And class 3 and 4, there are single and multi-parameter indicators. So that means the indicator will say so much time has passed and this much temperature has reached over a period of time. Okay, so this means there are more than 2 parameters they are catching. So class 5 is integrating everything, all the critical parameters like time, temperature, pressure. And class 6 is biological indicator. So you really have live spores in the container in that indicator, and the idea is to kill all the live spores. This is since we use biological spores, it is called as biological indicator. Right. So Bowie-Diggs test, I said it's a test indicator. You have to use it every day before starting autoclave, and the results have to be maintained in the register. So the Bowie-Diggs is a big sheet. You can stick it onto a register, or you can use this printout and in your register. Then PCD test every day before the instrument load. Again, the results have to be maintained in this register, CSST sterilization register. So there is a gold standard verification. So it is nothing but the biological indicator. So this has to be used once a week. Keep all original records in the operation theater and HIC department. Maintain the results in Excel sheet to get enough data for assessment. Autoclave register is a statutory documentation. In case you have a single infection or a cluster infection, this is the important register that will save you from the law enforcement authorities. You need to have record of every cycle, the load details, class 5 indicators ideally, or classic indicator. That indicator has to be stuck to the page, and the signature has to be obtained from the 2 people ideally, the operator as well as the staff in charge. And so once, if you have a department like structure, you will store the sterilized product in an area, in a storage room. You need to maintain the storage room lighting, the humidity and the temperature properly, and for that you need to maintain that storage room parameters also. Right. So for ETO, you need to record details of every cycle, the load details, the indicator. ETO has a separate indicator as well as all the parameters. If it is automated machine, this kind of printed sheet will come, you can use them. And ETO products you will be storing for a long time. Ideally, leave a gap of 2 days to use the ETO'd items. So always have a ETO issue register, which department or which surgery it is going, so that you can track the mechanism. So managing sterilization failure, in case the indicator fails, so you need to have a system in place to look into it effectively, report it and correct it, and also you need to have a system if the one load fails, or if you have an infected patient on from one load, you need to have a system in place to recall the other items and also trace it to the patient. So this is called recall and traceability. All these are in the NABH standards. Air culture, again, we don't advocate on a regular basis. Basically, some hospitals have it as a policy once a month or every 3 months. But active air sampling is not really mandated when you have a air handling unit. Then air culture, again, you need to have this system while you are commissioning the AHU or when there is a cluster attack. So after cluster endophthalmitis attack, if you want to recommission the theater, you need to have this air validation mechanism. Then the water being used for instrument, you can have weekly or monthly water culture just to know about the safety of water being used. And if you are using a potable water source, at least every 3 months you need to have a water culture. So generally this is the bacteriological investigation of water. OT culture again, so there are various recommendations. The NHM says monthly record is needed as per the Clinical Establishment Act. There are various state variations for this, but always have it as a policy to have occasional OT culture. So comprehensive audit approach, regular audit is essential. Also a random spot check is necessary if you have any tasks, and direct observation of staff practices is necessary. So I have a CCTV in the cleaning area as well as washing areas. So this gives some amount of control and surveillance over the staff. So these are the key audit elements. So these are the frequent non-conformities we see in the hospital: inadequate cleaning, improper packaging techniques affecting steam penetration, incomplete documentation, failure to follow manufacturer instruction, and inappropriate storage of sterilized items. So you also need to document all these improvements. So key takeaways: effective corrective action is necessary. Patient safety depends on rigorous sterilization practices, and hospital safety depends on regular auditing and surveillance mechanism. So thank you so much for your kind attention. Thanks, Kumaran, for the invite.
So I'm sure you would have a lot of questions, and my next talk is going to be on packaging and validating the sterilized goods. So we'll be happy to take your questions once I finish the talk, because most of your questions will be answered in this. This is going to be a video based session, because more sterilization is always a dry topic, so I've included a lot of videos to make it interesting. So I'm going to talk about packaging and selecting the appropriate cycle for the loads and validation of the cycle. So I have no financial interest in any of the products I'm going to show you. Before we go into the real topic, it's very important for every management to take care of the staff. There are 10 points of standard of infection control, and we're going to talk about safe care and management of these equipments. Teach your staff, immunize them against the bloodborne diseases, because you're going to handle a lot of sharp instruments. Provide them the adequate PPDs before they handle the sterilization process. So we all know what are the standards of sterilization. Only 1 in a million is allowed to survive, that is 10 to the power of -6. This is the minimum level of sterilization that is required, because it is assumed that any load which is unsterile has 10 to the power of 6 amount of microorganisms. As Dr. Nirmal told you frequently, always follow the manufacturer guidelines when you sterilize the goods, because when you buy a new instrument and if it doesn't work after a few autoclaves, you would definitely see the manufacturer telling you that this is not the right way of manufacturing. As you could see, the simple irrigation aspiration tubing, they have clearly mentioned how it should be packed, how it should be sterilized, and what temperature has to be done. So once you do not follow this, then it's going to be difficult for you to claim your warranty also. So basically there are 3 types of autoclaves. I'm just going to touch upon them, what is needed. Gravity autoclaves, Dr. Nirmal had told you N stands for negative pressure. It's also be called as naked solid instrument, should be only sterilized here, because as you know, in this chamber, the hot air is lighter, it goes up. So it's a displacement autoclave. Vacuum assisted is of 2 types, class S and class B. Simply means, to understand it, class S means it sucks the air out, and B is big in function, and smaller size autoclaves is what calls a B autoclave. So it's very easy for you to keep this mnemonic in mind when you are talking about class S and class B, and there are 2 kinds of temperatures used here. So how do you decide what load you want? First, the most important thing is the water source, because only if you have a proper water source you can get a saturated steam. Remember, the steam should not be hypersaturated or hyposaturated, which could decrease the efficiency of sterilization. So what is saturated steam? 3 to 5% of the moisture. So this will tell you or help you to understand the process. So the phase 1 is preconditioning. So what happens in a class S autoclave is that there's only 1 pulse. So the vacuum pump takes the air only once. But in class B, this spike is multiple times. So the pump works multiple times to take the air out. So this is the basic difference between a S and a B autoclave. Then you have the phase 2 coming up, means the temperature keeps on rising. Then this steam is let into the main chamber where the time depending upon your load is maintained. That is IUSS. I saw someone asking about flash sterilization. Flash sterilization is not the terminology used. It is called IUSS, which means immediate use steam sterilization. It has a role in ophthalmology, which I'll be talking about later. Then comes the normal, which we follow 15 minutes at 120 degrees Celsius. So understanding the cycle would also help you to understand what kind of loads needs to be sterilized in these instruments. So this is an important chart. So you have an unsterile load. So ask your question. Green. The blue one means yes, and the red arrow means no. So does your load contain liquid or not? If it doesn't contain a liquid, the next question you ask, can the air be removed from this load easily? Which means whether you have an hollow instruments or not. And if the air cannot be removed from these instruments, for example, ophthalmic practice has a lot of hollow instruments, then use the pre-vacuum cycle, which is simply the class S or class B, which I told you. If the air can be removed easily, then use a gravity cycle. So the gravity or the vertical autoclave does have a role in ophthalmic practice if you're using only to sterilize naked instruments and your linen. If you're using hollow instrument, please don't use the gravity cycle autoclave. The pre-vacuum cycle is enough. Just for interest sake, in case you have a liquid to be sterilized, because I see a lot of people still autoclaving the RL bottle or the BSS bottle, then ask the question, is the container flexible with residual air inside? If not, does the liquid tend to boil when it is heated? If not, use the liquid cycle. So if the container is flexible with air inside, use the steam air mixture. So what is steam air mixture? Most of the autoclaves have the provision of letting in the normal air from the atmosphere into your autoclave, which is the cycle which is present in most of your autoclave programs. And if it boils over, use the air over pressure, which prevents it from doing it. See, these two protocols are just for interest sake, and if you are going to autoclave fluids, suppose you have a multi-specialty hospital where you use a common autoclave, so these are the questions which you should answer. But if you're a pure standalone eye care hospital, then the top part of your chart holds good, because we don't autoclave any liquids nor your visco. So the type of packing material is very important. The steam autoclave, these are the materials available: paper, plastic, cloth fabric, plastic paper pouches, and wrapped perforated cassettes. All of them work very well, and you can use whatever is convenient to you and available. The fabric, if you're using, there are two types, woven and non-woven. These are two different types of a material or the pattern which is used for weaving. See, so how does this work? When this material or the fabric is exposed to saturated steam, they swell up and they block the air from outside from getting in. So this is the reason why you should never reuse your packaging material, because there are no pores there. So the product inside these paper plastic pouches will still remain unsterile, but the external surface becomes sterile. So never reuse your plastic paper pouches. This is a very important because a lot of places where we go for inspection, they keep on reusing the gowns and the wrapping materials. Non-woven fabric are latest advances. They can be spun bound, heat bound, or melt bound. All are equally effective. Tyvek is another material where you could see the water droplets rolling down them. Spun bounded material made up of high ethylene polypropylene. ETO has a different packing material. Ensure that the proper packing material is used for these ETO. This tabular column gives you an idea of what is needed. For steam, polythene is not essential, and for plasma only polyethylene is needed. So use the proper material and know what autoclave you're having, and use the proper packing material accordingly. So styrofoam trays are very, very effective. The only thing you have to follow is have adequate space. Don't pack these trays with a lot of instruments, because you're going to allow steam to penetrate. Use a class 5 integrator in every tray. If you have 10 cases, always have 10 instrument sets and put in a class 5 into each tray. don't have a single tray and each time open up and take these instruments for all these 10 cases. It's always good to have 10 trays for 10 cases or so. Sealing them is very important. There's a medical grade sealant, and the sealant thickness is around 3 to 5 millimeters, which ensure that the product insides are always sterile. So if you're going to use a wrapping material, there are different types of technique used to wrap, the box technique or the envelope technique. You can use whatever you want to, all are quite effective. The main process is to ensure that the product inside remains sterile, and when it is opened by a third person, it continues to remain sterile, and they're able to open it and the assistant is taken in a sterile manner. Nowadays pre-fabricated stickers are available, which is very easy for us to pack. As I told you, gowns are made up of these disposal materials should not be reused, but I'm just telling you how to fold a linen gown in case you're going to reuse it. Ensure that the linen is sterile, it has reached your sensory area after proper protocol. And because a lot of time we see that even the one which we get as disposal, they're not folded in the proper way. The surgeon has to find the head end and the tail end, and you'd find that the gown touching all the table and everywhere around. So this video tells you how a linen has to be folded, just to follow the no-touch technique. So when you're going to unwrap this gown, the surgeon could be easily gown this without touching the unsterile areas. So this particular disposable gown is just used for a demonstration purpose. So this is how it should be folded. So once you're going to unfold it and wear it, it's going to be very easy with the no touch technique. The inside of the thing remains unsterile and the outside still remains sterile. Yes. So this normally with the latest techniques, a bin should never be used to sterile to autoclave instruments, but it can be used to autoclave linen. Here you could see the paramedical staff really putting in a lot of linen into the sterile. This should not be done. You should allow adequate space for the steam to penetrate all throughout. And in case you're using your bin to sterilize your instrument, make sure they are kept inside the bin unpacked. This is a very important point which you should keep. Otherwise, just use your bin to sterilize your linen load if you're still using your linen for your surgeries. So as I told you, this is a newer term for flash sterilization. It's called immediate use steam sterilization. They have a role in ophthalmology. The temperature used for this is 131 degrees Celsius for 5 minutes. There's a rapid increase in temperature. So it's used only for emergency use. For example, if you have an IOL cutter or any other instrument which is rarely used, then and if it falls down and becomes unsterile, then this can be used. Hence, this instrument has to be kept inside unpacked. You should never pack these instruments, and they have to be used immediately. They cannot be stored for use, and hence because they cannot be packed, this instrument has to be kept in the sterile area or inside your theatre. And this form of sterilization should not be used as a routine and only for emergency purpose. So next part is validation. So what is validation and why is validation needed? This is a textbook definition of validation, but to simply mean that the lot of processes in manufacturing, by just looking at the product, we would never able to say that the process of sterilization has been done. For example, if you see an instrument, can you just say that this instrument is sterile or not? We cannot. So for this purpose, we have a lot of validation devices. For example, why are you keeping the temperature at 21 degrees Celsius and for 21 minutes? So this is basically called validation. And monitoring is means that a physical checking of all the parameters of temperature and pressure. And verification is also very important, and the most important part of verification is the biological indicator. So validation, monitoring and verification is an important part of a sterilization process, which could keep you away from the medical legal cases in case there's a sterilization failure and the patient ends up with an endophthalmitis. So validation consists of three parts: installation qualification which is supplied to you by the manufacturer, a operation qualification, and a performance qualification. So the three parameters. So what is installation qualification means? Once the manufacturer sets up the autoclave in your place, he has to give you a calibration certificate showing that the machine is working well. The operation qualification is for you to check physically and manually all the pressure gauge and the valves, and the performance qualification is all the value indicators, which I'll be talking about subsequently. So performance qualifications of two types: physical monitoring and the biological activator. So this is a certificate which will be provided by the manufacturer to you when you buy the autoclave. Please ensure that the date and sign, everything are accurate before you take the autoclave into your notice. So there are different types of autoclave indicators, and this comes among the performance indicator, which I'll be talking about later. The biological indicator, the spores has to be used is Bacillus turcothermophilus, because this is the most resistant one. As I told you, why 121 degrees Celsius is used, because only at 121 degrees Celsius, the spores of the Bacillus turcothermophilus are completely destroyed. So this is the reason why 121 degrees Celsius and 15 minutes is used, because that is the time needed to kill the most heat resistant spores in your autoclave cycle. So when is a biological test indicated? This is very important. During installation, relocation, after a malfunction, after you repair your autoclave, and the event of a sterilization failure. So what should you do before you start doing your autoclave? That is, if you buy a new autoclave or if it has failed and it's come back to you, 3 consecutive negative test of biological indicator with a class 5 integrator and a sterilization printout are all needed before you commission your autoclave. This is very important. So now let's see what are the indicators that should be used. Suppose if you want to just sterilize your routine loads, that is linen, and for surgical instrument, the first 2 columns are the same. That is a physical parameter monitoring and a class 1 tape is stuck outside. For a linen load, any one of these 5 is more than important. But if you're using a surgical instruments and an implant, then you need to have a biological indicator and a class 5 for every load. You have to monitor the efficacy of the sterilizer. So the first one is for your load. The second one is to monitor that the sterilizer is functioning well. So this should be done in an empty chamber if it is a class S or a class N, and an AIOS autoclave, and a loaded chamber if it is a gravity based autoclave. And this is as I told you earlier, during an installation, relocation and malfunction, these are the parameters which has to be followed. So summarizing, there are commissioning and performance qualification indicators which has to be followed before you take up the indicators. So this is a small video which basically tells you how you really have to do all these indicators. I'm not going to talk about how these instruments are cleaned, that is beyond the scope of this topic. So once the instruments are cleaned and they are packed individually in different sets depending on the number of cases you have. Always use a medical grade sealant, because the sealant is around 3 to 5 millimeters, and ensure that a class 5 integrator is placed in every set. And always use the plastic paper pouches and ensure that an adequate space available around each tray for the steam to penetrate inside, as shown by this paramedical staff. And ensure you place the autoclave in a vertical orientation, never in a horizontal orientation, because only this allows steam to go through. Biological indicator is the most important one. Always have 2 vials of the BI for every cycle. One should be packed the same way you pack your instruments, because it follows the stain process, and the other is kept outside as a control. You can also place them in your linen load or the instrument load just to ensure that everything goes on well. The Bavitic test usually is helpful only for a vacuum pump autoclave. It ensures that the air has been completely removed from the autoclave. It should be done only on an empty cycle. An empty chamber. You have to keep it in between vertical loads of linen. Place it in the most demanding part of the autoclave, which is usually the exit or the entry. This is a double door autoclave. You need not run the entire cycle, just the 121 degrees Celsius for 15 minutes, and then you can open it immediately. Okay, have a visual check to ensure that the paper has completely changed, and only then pack your instruments. Ideally, according to American standards, a bovitic test should be run after every cycle or at least the beginning of the day. The bovitic also comes in strips. If you're using smaller autoclaves, you can use the strips. So this is an troubleshooting sheet which Dr. Niranjan will be talking to you about suppose if your bovitic doesn't change, what are the parameters which you have to look into. Dr. Niranjan, the next stop is basically on troubleshooting the failures. So I'm going to skip this slide. The next one is the class 6 autoclave, which is otherwise called the PCD. That is known as the process challenge device. So what is the process we're going to challenge? That is the ability of the autoclave to make the steam go inside a hollow tube, because we do have tubings, right? So this is a 1 meter long tube. It's available in silicon or stainless steel. The strip is folded as shown here. The way you insert the strip inside the holder is very important. So this basically works on the principle that your autoclave is able to remove the air inside this 1 meter, 0.1 millimeter lumen tube, and then the steam is able to reach the other end of the holder. So this is also again packed the same way you pack your instruments and placed along with your sterilizing goods or your instruments. It can be also placed inside linen if you're going to use the gravity-based autoclave. So always having a horizontal double-door autoclave makes a lot of sense, because you can directly open this at the other end into the sterile area, and you can directly go into the operation theatre. Troubleshooting device or a strip or a thing that you can stick it in your CSD area and teach the staff of how to troubleshoot a failed PCD test. So pre-vacuum autoclave, porous use the bovitic test, hollow instrument use the PCD. So once the autoclave is open, always teach your paramedical staff to first inspect all the indicators to ensure that the proper color change has happened. So here you could see the paramedical staff visually inspecting all the validating indicators. As a surgeon, it is your duty to always have a look at all these indicators before you start your surgery, because if the staff education is not proper, then they could miss a failure. So always again follow the manufacturer guidelines telling you what is a clear-cut, a positive test and not. The biological indicator is very important. As I told you earlier, one is kept outside and the other is it's processed inside the sterilizer. Once this is coming out, to understand the biological indicator, it consists of two tubes. The outer one is a silicone tube, and the inner one is a glass tube which has a broth inside. So break the glass tube so that the indicator and the broth are mixed, and this is incubated at a biological indicator incubator, which is easily available and not very expensive. It is incubated at 57 degrees Celsius for 48 hours. And it is based on the fact that the violet is kept outside, the bacillus has not been deactivated. So after 48 hours, you will find that it has grown and the color changes to yellow, whereas the one which is kept inside doesn't change color because the bacillus has been killed. So this is the basic, and the biological indicator is the most important indicator which would help you to prove that your indicator or your load is sterile. Then whatever said and done, make sure you have a proper validating and a recording technique where all the indicators are stuck on the tubes. So steam does has disadvantages because it cannot sterilize all this. For this, what we use your ETO and your plasma indicators. And ETO, as I told you, has a different validation sticker, so don't use your steam validation stickers for your ETO. So shelf life of sterilized goods is a very hot question everywhere, and to understand this you have to understand Newton's law of motion, which says that every object continues to be in a state of motion or rest unless an external force acts on it. Similarly, every sterile good continues to remain sterile unless it is being disturbed by any one of these factors. The quality of the paper goes off if your storage area is not good, the storage condition is not good, for example, the temperature, pressure and the relative humidity is not maintained, conditions during transport and the amount of handling. So hospitals can follow their own protocols of how long they have to maintain a sterile goods. So there is no clear-cut dictum, and a lot of studies which have found that the goods have continued to be sterile even after 16 months. So it all depends upon the wrapping material and your storage area. Thank you. We would take up Dr. Niranjan's talk, and then I think we have a lot of time. We would be happy to answer your questions.
So, very good afternoon to one and all. So, it feels great to have fair amount of audience in spite of being the fag end of the day, after being a busy day for everybody, and welcome you all to this very unique IC again on sterilization processes. So my role here today is going to be more of a summarization of what we've heard from the two stalwarts in the field of quality and sterilization. So at the outset, I would like to thank Kumran sir for having me here, and Nirmal sir for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this. So before we jump to the proper troubleshooting part, some basic principles that I would like to reiterate upon, basically summing up today's session, is the three main indicators that we are going to be worried about. What are they? Time, temperature, and pressure. So I hope if there is one message that should be driven home from today's IC, that should be the case, right? That should be the info. So what I'm going to try to tell you is to see that they are working properly is what we use these indicators and all the processes in place. So I'm not going to delve into the details of each of the classes because that has been dealt with exhaustively. So some pictures to show as to what is expected of each class. As you can see here for class 1, it is just going to let us know whether these packages have been exposed to physical conditions of the sterilizer or not, right? So they are not going to give us an idea about whether what is enclosed within that package has been made sterile, right? So that's pretty much what class 1 does. In case the very class 1 is going to show us some signs of failure, then that basically means that the sterilizer hasn't reached the temperature set point, right? So that is a flaw right at the basic level. So what do you need to do? You need to check the power source, you check for leak from the steam generator, and one important point is we saw in Sir's talk, the ability of an autoclave is nothing but to get rid of the air and to get steam in, maintain it at the right temperature and pressure for the given period, right? So getting air out is also a very crucial part of the whole process. And remember that the chamber drain block, which is preventing this air from escaping, right, that is again going to completely disturb the process of sterilization, and the steam also is hindered from reaching the right temperature and pressure. So this is again shaking the very basics of the process of an autoclave. And wrong temperature being entered, not adhering to 121 degrees for 5 minutes, all of that again means that class 1 itself can show us signs of not functioning properly as an autoclave should. Now moving on to class 2, like we've dealt with exhaustively with Bowie-Dix test, available in two forms, different shapes. We can use it as strips, we can use it as a whole paper, and it is also available in this square shaped shape and size. So like Sir was mentioning, the first step of the day, it is to be done with each day within a dynamic air removal sterilizer. And what does that check for? So my role here is to let you know what does each class look for. So air leaks, inadequate air removal, and inadequate penetration of the steam, and last but not the least, presence of non-condensable gases, right? So this is a picturesque demonstration of what an unused test looks like, and the test not having been passed, and lastly the test being passed. So remember, if there is an air leak, it's as simple as that the air is not going to steam is not going to be able to penetrate the load properly because air is going to hinder the penetration. So we need to run the vacuum leak test. Secondly, like I mentioned, if there is a condensation in the steam jacket, that can lead to certain cold spots, and these cold spots, what do we mean by this cold spot is the temperature is best only if the steam is in the form of steam rather than the liquid form. We all know that the boiling point is a concept where the steam is at a much higher energy, like sir mentioned, 7 times the energy as that of water in its liquid form in the same temperature, of 100 degrees. So we need to check the steam valves to ensure that this mistake doesn't happen. And this is a very underestimated point in our routine practice. Sometimes we buy Bowidic strips in bulk, and what we fail to do is check its expiry date and the storage conditions in which they are placed. So this is often missed out on even by our OT personnel. So that is one area that we must be aware of, and let the OT personnel know that this is important to not store them for long and ensure that they are well within their expiry dates. And we just saw that if there is no warm-up cycle, we need to run a 5-minute cycle prior to doing the Bowidex test. And some part which is again often neglected is the incorrect procedure. It is important for us to ensure that the chamber is empty and the right temperature is set to be able to achieve a good amount of sterilization. And now moving on to class 5, so integrating indicators. What do I mean by that? See, like we discussed, there are multiple parameters of concern: time, pressure and temperature. So class 5 helps us address each one of them at one go. So it is designed to react to all the critical variables at play and should be used within each sterilizer container. See, that is what again I would like to emphasize, is that using it as a one for all of what we do is not the right way to do it. And even for using like what sir was saying, for flash sterilization modified into the modern technique, it is advised to use it along with that as well, right? So some of the procedural errors associated. Now placing one pouch inside another, or one container into another, all of that should be avoided, and packing it too close and in a very crowded fashion should be avoided. Last but not the least, as sir has demonstrated wonderfully in the videos, the size of the pack should match with the instrument in question. There is no point using a very big pack for a very small piece of instrument, and that is going to create a lot of discrepancy. And using artificial linen, what is the solution? Use recommended packing material. We just spoke about the 2 types of fabrics that are based on the weaving pattern, and also use it of the appropriate size. So second part of the procedural error is the loading part. So overstacking it one on top of the other, overloading it and packing it too close, all of these should be avoided, so that adequate space between the trays allows for better penetration of the steam. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you want the steam to penetrate the pack and sterilize the contents. If you're going to hinder it in every possible way by keeping other packs around it, it's not going to serve the purpose. And if there is signs of malfunctioning of the equipment, like incomplete air removal, inadequate steam, inadequate temperature being built, insufficient time, or the quantity of the steam being poor, run certain sterilization cycles, and also make sure to test the vacuum pumps. So vacuum pumps are often a very ignored part of the sterilization process, and their function is quite crucial. And the PCD part. So sir has wonderfully explained about the process challenging devices. The aim is to remove the air from the hollow instruments. So as depicted in the table, what to use for solid and what to use for hollow instruments are to be very clearly understood. And the ability of the autoclave to penetrate steam through the lumens of this hollow instruments is what is detected by the PCD. And the test is involving placing a chemical strip, and we saw in the video, at the end of the tubing. So the steam has to have traveled the entire distance of the tubing to be able to pass this test, right? So these are all the reasons why. And air pockets, like sir mentioned, is one crucial part inside hollow tubings that is quite unique to this type of instruments that we have, like the phaco tubings, right? So that is one important point. Lastly, the biological indicator, Geobacillus stereothermophilus. So if the spores survive, then there is a problem. If there is no spore that survives and then the test passes, that shows complete sterilization. And last topic, wet packs after sterilization, what do we do? See, a wet pack can cause contamination issues because of excessive moisture that can act as a pathway for microbes, right? So two types of moisture. One is the external moisture, which is associated with the sterilizer leak, insufficient steam removal by the vacuum pump. And second is the internal moisture, which is the classical problem of insufficient air removal, improper packing, as we just discussed. So what are the operator related errors which can result in this? Like I discussed, overloading, wrong cycles of sterilization, improper handling, and all these are to be avoided to avoid this wet pack issue. And what if there is a component failure? The way to go forward is to check all the traps of steam on the autoclave, and all the linings and the pipes are in proper condition, and also the valves are functioning properly. And lastly, the steam supply issues to be taken care of by making sure you have proper maintenance of the equipments and providing adequate pressures, and all those criteria to be satisfied. So lastly, how do we troubleshoot it? Avoid improper storage. And not only that, once you take the load out of the sterilizer, what do we do after that also counts. So a load that comes straight out of the sterilizer is often hot and can attract a certain amount of moisture, and stacking the load on top of another like pile of books, that is one mistake we must avoid, because it basically creates a pocket of air between and two different packs, and that can be a pretty much a good place for the buildup of moisture, and hence a wet patch in this whole process. So with that I conclude my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Niranjan, for this wonderful talk. I think wet pack is something which is very common, and most of us could have seen a wet pack at one point of time or other in your practice. Having a little bit of moisture is all right, but having a completely wet pack is actually not acceptable, because you can't store this pack, because when the pack is wet and you put it in a CSSD area, this is obviously going to attract more moisture and bacteria into the pack. So wet pack is one of the major source of contamination and loss of sterility in a pack which is kept in the CSSD area. So if you have any questions, we'll be happy to take it. So could you please use the mic, sir, because
how long we can keep the autoclave material once we have done one cycle of autoclaving? Then after what time we can use the material?
So as I told you, if the instrument is packed, there are actually no literature to say that it should be kept at this particular period of time.
Okay.
So as a hospital, you can maintain your own process, but as I told you in one of the slides, and I gave you an example of Newton's law, a pack which is sterile continues to be sterile unless it is disturbed by any of the other factors. For example, the package is being torn, or there is moisture on it, so all these factors. So ideally at our hospital, we keep the sterile goods for 2 to 4 days.
Okay, thank you.
So actually if it is not being disturbed and the pack is sterile and your room temperature is good, you can keep it for a longer duration also.
Disposable gowns. Can we re-sterilize it with the ETO?
Yeah, that's what see, the disposable gown is should be disposed after single use, because what happens is when they are ETO'd and they come to you and they open the first time, these pores of that gown are closed. So if you're going to autoclave this, only one side of this gown is going to be sterile, whereas the other side is going to be unsterile. Because the steam will not be able to penetrate the gown, because there are no pores there.
Even ETO.
Even ETO.
And before, in the beginning, I used to use a vertical autoclave and a cloth around the instrument box. But what happens is there are a lot of fibers on the cloth, and that gets into the instruments, and that gets into the eye, and that causes the end of the root to get inside the eye. So this thing, when I stopped it and the packing the other way, the sealing and all these things, it's totally gone.
Yeah, so that is one of the basic reasons why we say we are going away from linen, because if you see the cost of handling linen, the time consumed, the amount of water you use, the washing material, it is not very economical. So that's why the disposable things have come into place. And actually, if you do a proper analysis, you will find the disposables are much economical and safe rather than the linen.
Handpiece of the FECO handpiece and the tubings. If we do ETO, I think it's gives a longer lifespan for those like the handpiece and things like that, because
Yeah, basically because ETO uses less heat, it's around 70 degrees Celsius, and plasma uses much lesser than that, 40. So less heat, the instrument's longevity is increased. That is the main reason why plasma is really finding its way inside.
the tubings is good. ETO is good, right? No problem with the
Yes.
tubings.
Yes, ETO can be used for the tubings. Only thing is that you should have a proper aeration time of 28 to 48 hours preferably, but you should understand that ETO gas is carcinogenic, so ensure that you have a proper protocol to safeguard your stuff.
Yeah, I mean the exhaust is there and it all gets
Yes.
out. But other than that, anything else for the ETO safety?
Nothing much, but you should also ensure that the canisters are disposed of properly, because if you find something out in your normal biomedical waste, then it's a problem. So ensure that you have a proper biomedical waste disposal of the empty canisters.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kumar. The only thing is, many times we are asked, what if there is no ETO facility? Or let us say if there is a failure of ETO, how do we sterilize these tubings?
So if you're talking only in particular of tubings, then you can also run the steam sterilizing cycle using the Class B autoclave for your steams, for your tubings.
Okay, but no, about the delicate instruments or tubings like vitrectomy and others, like cautery wires.
You have to find an
Previously we
alternate.
use the formalin chamber, right?
The formalin
Now
chamber
it's
is out of the question.
it's
Sidex
out of the
chambers are out of the question. Really, probably you have to find out what is the cause of the failure of the ETO,
Yeah.
get it ready, and
True, but
do
then
it.
apart from that, is there any other solution?
Plasma sterilizers can be used. Otherwise,
Plasma is only.
nothing else. Only ETO or plasma as for now for the other things. And formaldehyde chambers not
out.
safe, sir,
Is out, it's
because formaldehyde by itself is a carcinogen.
Yes.
So plasma or ETO is the only answers.
Air sterilization, we use this silver oxide, I think. It's silver, that kind of the blower on the...
For
the
air sterilization.
sterilization.
Okay.
And we of course use the UV light also. But, and we have HEPA filter, just the tabletop, right? And this, how is this silver thing?
So silver oxide and all these formaldehyde for sterilizing the air is actually not good, because they are still carcinogenic, and it keeps the room sterile only till the staff enter the chamber. So once the staff enter the chamber, all the squams which fall from a body surface, the hair and the moisture when we speak, contaminate the room. So a room is sterile if no one is going to enter inside. But once all the staff enter inside, then these form of sterilizations are of no good. And the only thing which is proved is your HVAC system, which is heating air ventilation system, which would give a continuous process of clean and purified air even when the persons are present inside the theatre. These small tabletop, these HEPA filters, the problem with them is that they cannot be validated. See, for example, you have an area of 400 square feet and you have a small HEPA filter which is not going to suck in all the air in a 400 square feet and give it back. Correct? So you need a HEPA filter which is able to take in the air present inside a 400 square feet room, which is 400, say 20 into 10 by 20, which is a huge volume of air, that is 3,600 cubic feet of air, how can you expect a small HEPA filter to purify it? So that is the basic concept. These tabletop HEPA filters are of no good.
What about a bigger one, or
Sorry, sir.
many of those, or a bigger capacity ones which can,
The problem is they cannot be validated. Very difficult to validate them. Yeah, that is the purpose of it, sir. Because sterilization is different from disinfection. We never try to sterilize a theater. I only try to disinfect it. Yes, exactly. So there's another valid point, because these HEPA filters don't bring in fresh air. So only the stale air inside is keeping on being filtered. So the HVAC system ensures that the air enters from the outside, which is also fresh. They are air circulators rather than air filters. So as I told you before, the 4 phases, see, after the 121 degrees Celsius for 15 minutes is reached, okay, that is the contact time. So once this is reached, the steam inside the chamber has to be removed, or else they will form droplets over the instruments, which will lead to a wet pack. So once the steam has done its work, okay, we don't need the steam, you take it out immediately. So that is the phase, it's called the drying phase. So the drying phase is also not good. You will have a lot of wet packs in it. So the importance of drying phase is to avoid wet packs. So I think we could call it a day. And thank you all of you for being here so late, being last session of this day. Thank you all. And thank you to my co-speaker, Dr. Niranjan also.